Hello and welcome to another captain video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. It's double game week time again. This time it's a biggie. There's 14 teams playing twice and there's certainly no shortage of captaincy options. My name is Joe and joining me is David to look at the best armband options for double game week 26. David, how are you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks. We're at a limbo stage while we're recording this, so I can't actually tell you how my captaincy went last week completely. I was on Bamford. We're recording this before the Southampton game, kind of hoping that I get something there because the Wolves game really didn't go how we would have hoped. But as I said last week's double game week, in my opinion, was somewhat underwhelming compared to what we could hope to expect. And here we are now with the bumper double game week, 14 teams playing twice, considerably wider pool of captain options, which is quite nice. And the way the poll's going at the moment, perhaps not how I was expecting it to go. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for some strong differential captains.
So to timestamp this is Tuesday morning. So this is ahead of the Leeds Southampton game, which rounds off game week 25. So it's game week 26 we're looking at. So is the poll up already for the captaincy for game week 26?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I can let you know how things are at the moment. So Harry Kane is currently top of the poll with 34% backing. Bruno Fernandez in second place with just 15.4%. And Ilkay Gundogan is currently on course for a bronze medal in this race with 10%.
Plenty of opportunity for differentials, especially if the Mourinho Spurs turns up. And by turns up, I mean doesn't turn up in an attacking sense. So lots of options there. So what I'm going to put up is I'll put up from our season ticker. I've put up from Fantasy Football Scout here. This is the Game Week 26 fixtures, but sorted in terms of difficulty. So by this, I think it's fairly safe to say we should be targeting for the captaincy teams at the top of this table, the bluer side of it. So the teams with good fixtures, and we'll talk about these in more detail in a bit, is Tottenham, they're Burnley and Fulham, Everton, Southampton and West Brom, Villa have Leeds and Sheffield United, and Crystal Palace have Fulham and Manchester United. Now, they're the ones at the top. I'm not saying captain a Villa asset because Jack Grealish is probably not available for at least one of those matches. Crystal Palace is Crystal Palace, but we'll come to them a bit later in terms of some of the teams that are facing them, in particular Manchester United. But much lower down that list, you do have Manchester United, Chelsea they've got, and Crystal Palace. Liverpool have a double, so Salah is an option, but he's got Sheffield United. Okay, that's good, but then Chelsea, and we know the Chelsea defence is really good at the moment. Man City have West Ham and Wolves at home, and I don't think those fixtures are in question, but it's possible rotation. They're playing twice a week for quite a long period, so there are rotation fears there, and that's not what you want in the captaincy. Over the years, I don't know about you, David, but I've been burnt many times by captaining a City asset. Let's have a look at the top asset, though, in terms of the captaincy poll. So this is who most readers of Fantasy Football Scout at the moment are favouring, and that's Kane. Great fixtures on paper, but are they? And is the Spurs asset really the best bet for the captaincy this week? So we've got the fixtures up there, Burnley, Fulham. And as we talk, I've got some expected goal involvement stats I'll put up in a sec. But yeah, just firstly, Kane or perhaps Son, best captaincy options?
So this is what I was referring to when I said I was quite surprised by the result in the poll. People have watched Spurs. Well, I mean, maybe they're not. Maybe that's why they've all voted for them. For me, I just don't understand the clamour for Kane here.
No.
I mean, I get it from a nostalgia perspective. I get it from, well, not even nostalgia. That's completely wrong word to use. Because at the start of the season, he was a fantastic option. He was providing goals and assists. But of late, I just don't trust Spurs to do the job. And the thing is, the fixtures on paper, as you say, do look nice. But both Burnley and Fulham are very capable these days of chucking everyone behind the ball, knowing full well that Spurs are having problems breaking people down if they don't ask them any questions themselves. And both of these teams will take a point against Spurs. So they're not going to overstretch themselves, I wouldn't suggest, to go and win the game. I mean, over the last 4 matches, Burnley have the third best expected goals conceded in the league, so 3.18. The only 2 teams better than that are Chelsea and Man City. Fulham are in the top 5 3.23 goals they should have conceded, and they've only actually conceded the one goal. Their defense is doing much better as well, and they've both got fantastic goalkeepers too. So I for me, the fixtures, like, they I guess they look good on paper from a perspective of they're in the bottom 5 or the bottom 4, but actually these are teams that can frustrate Spurs. And then when we look at what Kane has offered recently, I'm going to talk a little bit about expected goal involvement.
Well, I've got the last 4 matches stats up, so I don't know if they tally with what you've got. But okay, so I've put the expected goal involvement. I've sorted it by, but this is all I've put a whole range of stats here. So we've got big chances, goals, assists, chances created, last 4 matches. So where are Kane and Son?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're significantly below a lot of the other options that arguably have fixtures that suit them better or are in better form. So, I mean, obviously, Gundogan, Fernandez, Salah, Sterling, Calvert-Lewin, Werner, Vardy, Barnes, Maddison. I mean, that's all showing that they have had better quality chances or have provided better quality potential assists than the 2 Spurs guys. Some of those guys, in my opinion, have better fixtures, which I guess we'll come on to in a minute. In terms of minutes per expected goal involvement, I just sorted the whole Premier League by minutes per expected goal involvement for the last 4 matches, and I discovered that 47 players had a better minutes per expected goal involvement in their last 4 matches. So it's not the last 4 matches, because it includes people who have perhaps been injured, or like Diogo Jota is in there, for example. If you want to get, because the game weeks, you've had some doubles and stuff, you have to click the last 4 matches. Otherwise, it's a little bit skewed.
For stats fans on Fantasy Football Scout, don't look at last 4 game weeks if you want to compare 2 players or different players from different teams, because at this stage of the season, they're not going to have played exactly the same. Some will have played 3, some will have played 2. Last 4 matches, that will throw up, as you say, some injured players or players that have been injured for some time. But great bit of advice there.
Yeah, and just, I mean, the result from this is that there's just so many players that basically should have or have scored better than Kane. And I mean, in terms of Son, I mean, he's even further down the list. I have to scroll like an extra 30 players to then get to Son. Minute per expected goal involvement for the last 4 matches for Son every 408 minutes, which is basically more than 4 matches. There's for me, I mean, the thing is, Spurs could come into this game week and Kane gets you a double figure haul. But what we have to make these decisions on, or managers like me and you, I think we make our decision making process is very similar. We want to be looking at a player that's top end for expected goal involvement. They should have been scoring decent points in the form that they've had, going up against a team that has been trounced quite convincingly relatively recently. Now, Burnley, that can happen against the top 4 sides. So just going back to those expected goal conceded figures, their last 4 matches, they haven't exactly been against, incredibly difficult oppositions: West Brom, Fulham, Palace and Brighton. So maybe that forms a part of it. But, they lost 2-0 to Man City, they lost 2-0 to Chelsea, they lost 1-0 to Liverpool. The point is, they weren't completely trashed. And the thing with Fulham, again, that they're sort of in a similar boat. They basically... it's quite rare now that they actually concede more than 1 goal, to be honest. Scott Parker knows how to basically frustrate teams. They drew 1-1 with Spurs. They lost 1-0 to Chelsea. They drew 1-1 with Liverpool. This is a team that can actually frustrate the big teams. So if Spurs aren't in form and their opponents know how to frustrate big teams, then I just can't see how he's a runaway captain candidate.
No, he
could be a good one, but not a runaway one like the poll suggests.
To go back to the old swords and shields metaphor, I consider Kane a shield pick. I'm considering getting him in, but that's because his ownership will be so high, because he will be so massively captained, that if he gets a goal, it's going to cost me. If I own him, and his effective ownership is over 100%, as in lots of his owners are captaining him, which I expect will happen, then the damage is going to be limited there. If I indeed captain him, then happy days if he does well. But as you said, I don't know if he will. These are tough fixtures. Burnley can frustrate. Big chances conceded last 4, 2 goals conceded 2. I mean, this is not a team that gets hammered. Fulham, they have conceded 5 big chances. I mean, bearing in mind Liverpool have conceded 14. And so that makes Fulham pretty good in terms of big chances conceded in comparison. They've only conceded 1 goal in the last 4. So this is really good. These are really good defensive stats. And when you assess Spurs, we've watched Spurs with under Mourinho. I mean, they're not a free-flowing, attacking, gung-ho, Bielsa, Leeds, murder ball side. They're a go 1-0 up and then just sit back, lads, and then concede and then draw 1-1.
Absolutely.
That's the kind of team they are.
Well, one other thing I just wanted to just add in as well, because we've mentioned about the defences. We haven't really talked about the goalkeepers in as much detail.
Okay.
And so what I've just gone into the members area to have a look at is expected goals prevented this season.
Okay.
Which just to anyone who doesn't necessarily understand the stat, it's a metric that measures the quality of chances that goalkeepers saved.
Yes.
So when a goalkeeper saves a big chance, typically the better goalkeepers are capable of doing that. You would generally say, as a general rule, across the whole season. So it means that anyone with a high XG prevented is a goalkeeper who has helped a team who's conceded maybe lots of chances still keep their clean sheet. So we saw with Dean Henderson, his figure for this last season was massive because Sheffield United conceded chances, he stopped them. Him leaving basically is the reason they can't defend anymore or can't keep clean sheets.
Yeah.
This season, the top 2 goalkeepers for expected goals prevented, plus 5.2 in second place is Areola of Fulham.
Okay.
And top with 6.5, plus 6.5 is Nick Pope.
Brilliant.
Burnley. So it means that Harry Kane is going up against the 2 best goalkeepers based on expected goals prevented. So even if Spurs completely dominate this game and they unleash a shower of shots at Burnley and Fulham, there's a higher chance that they don't score than if they were facing any other 8 of the other 18 teams in the league. And let's also not forget that Spurs haven't been unleashing showers of shots on goalkeepers of late. So that for me is why I get the whole fear of missing out on Kane, but I do think there's a massive opportunity here. If you don't break your team to get him in and captain someone else, you actually might possibly be better off.
Or you can go the ground I'm considering, which is get Kane in, but don't captain him. He's simply a shield pick. He's to mitigate against any possible hauls from Kane. But as you were saying, in comparison, I'm not sure I expect a massive haul from Kane compared to the others. I'm going to put those expected goal involvement stats back up again. Last 4 matches. Because there's a player in there that is in both our teams and is currently our bus captain. So it's our captain, in case tragedy happens with the bus and ourselves. This is the person we're captaining. He's someone a bit higher up. Last 4 matches, 4 big chances, expected to be involved in a couple of goals. He's in fact scored a couple of goals in his last 4. And his expected goal non-penalty, so he's not on penalties, is 1.71. So it's nearly a couple of goals there. But he's higher. He's way higher than Kane and Son. And it's Calvert-Lewin because he's got the best fixtures. I mean, let's put those fixtures back up again. Everton, Southampton and West Brom. I mean, when you're talking about defences, Burnley and Fulham defences are much better now. West Brom and Southampton defence, they're still conceding. They're still conceding a lot. He's back in the team. I mean, he got a return from the bench against Liverpool. We both were talking about him last week, saying we quite fancy Calvert-Lewin against Liverpool. So, why? I mean, I've said a bit about why I'm captaining or thinking of captaining Calvert-Lewin, but why are you?
Yeah, I mean, very much the same as you there, Joe. I mean, I'm not completely decided yet because, I don't like to make my decision completely at this point of the week. But as you said, my instinct when I just looked at the fixtures was his because of the 2 teams stood out to me, not as teams who are necessarily in an awful part of the table, although of course West Brom are, because I think that's what people think when they just look at Burnley, Fulham for Spurs. Having spent all my working time in the members area, it's quite easy for me to see Southampton and go, oh, okay, here we go. Because last 4 matches, still they're in the bottom 3 for expected goals conceded. West Brom have sort of mildly improved. Theirs is 3.77. So there's something like the 7th best. So potential improvements there, but we haven't really seen them, become the Allardyce, I guess, team of old and actually kind of start to capitalise on those things. It's kind of impressive because they have played United and they have played Spurs, but they're teams that I think they're prepared to set up shop against and just defend. Whereas possible that they kind of maybe feel like they can go for Everton, because actually Everton's own defence is not brilliant. Everton's defence last four is the fourth worst for expected goals conceded. So it's, I would expect West Brom to overstretch themselves a little bit more against Everton than we we expect West Brom to overstretch themselves against Everton more than they did against Spurs and United. Yeah. So, but to be fair, even just the Southampton fixture alone is one I quite like.
I mean, look at them. Yeah, big chances conceded. Only Liverpool have conceded more. They've conceded 12. They've conceded 15 goals, and their expected goals conceded is just under 8. So, I mean, that includes that. I think that includes the Manchester United result. So, but that's still, we've talked about this before. It doesn't actually dramatically skew their underlying stats. It does skew the goals conceded, but in terms of their underlying stats, they're still really poor. I think Calvert-Lewin has the better fixtures. I don't know what entirely to expect with Everton, and I'm going to be watching the Southampton Leeds game just to see. I want to see what sort of Southampton defence turns up, because it's that fixture I'm thinking of more than the West Brom one, but I do like the West Brom one as well for Calvert-Lewin.
Yeah, I think people should definitely just keep an eye on what formation they go with or have gone with, depending on when you're watching this, for the Leeds game, Southampton that is, because they've had a slight issue recently in terms of personnel, which initially was one of the reasons why they were conceding so badly, because obviously they conceded so badly against United, to be fair, because they had someone sent off right near the beginning, but they've had problems in the fullback areas, which we've documented that in quite a lot of detail of late. But they played with a slightly different setup, dare I say, against Chelsea, where they put Bednarek at right back. So when you've got someone like him who he's not the slowest guy in the world, and sometimes when you play a centre back at fullback, you sometimes end up with a team that is actually slightly more secure than you might expect, because he's not adventurous enough to go forward and leave gaps. So when Southampton have played people like Valerie at right back, but this is when Walker-Peters is not around, of course, they expose themselves because Valerie doesn't have the discipline to come back and defend properly if he's going to go forward and create some opportunities. Even Walker-Peters, I think is a good player, but he's always got his mind on what's in front of him as well as what's behind him. So he's thinking about two things. Bednarek isn't the kind of guy that's going to bomb forward and start putting crosses in. So we need to keep an eye on what happens in the Leeds game, because if they go with that setup again, which, by the way, when Bertrand goes forward, can become a back three as well, because they're three centre-backs. They can cope with that quite nicely. Because I didn't think Chelsea opened them up anywhere near as much as we expected them to in game week 25. So I still think that they can get turned over. The stats suggest that has happened. But we just want to keep an eye on what their defence gets up to against Leeds, then pair that with what they did against Chelsea. And this is what I mean about decision-making process on Calvert-Lewin. I'm not quite there yet. If I see something against... Because we know what Leeds are like. We know what they're capable of doing. If Leeds don't completely turn Southampton over when they're in possession and expose gaps between them, then it makes me a little bit concerned that maybe Everton can't get as much as I want out of this as well. So... yeah, definitely be keeping an eye on what happens with Southampton this week.
Yes, definitely. So I'm just looking at some of the other options as well. So Calvert-Lewin is in the mix for us, but we want to check out those defences a bit more. And I think obviously the Southampton defence is key. But looking at some of the other matches taking place, so I'll go back to the fixture difficulty again, and a bit further down is Manchester United there, Chelsea and Crystal Palace away. Fernandez is going to be hugely captained, and he's hugely owned. And in a normal game week, if you don't captain him, you're looking at a red arrow if he scores. So yeah, what do you think about Fernandez for the captaincy?
Yeah, that's absolutely the way I'm looking at it. He has been a drain on my team for several weeks, despite him being in my team, and it's so frustrating. I mean, that may change if Leeds and Southampton assets do come off in game week 25, then maybe it's not so much of a problem. But people kind of laughed at anyone who suggested they might captain Fernandez over Bamford, for example, in game week 25, and one game in, he's got 12 points, I think it is. He's got a double figure haul because he got another goal and assist, and he's so consistent. And he's I don't want to say he's jammy, because he's a quality player, and United are a team that create their own luck, I think, with the way that they play. But he's the kind of guy that will have a bad game and still come away with 12 points. And he's done that consistently. It's not like at this point, it doesn't feel like overperformance against XG or anything like that. He is just the kind of guy that is just going to get you something. And so then when it's a double game week, that makes me even more inclined to just go with him, especially when I think about Kane and needing to protect against him. I think possibly the best way to protect against Kane, other than owning Kane and captaining Kane, I think is possibly to captain Fernandez because of the damage he can do to someone who owns Fernandez and doesn't captain him. Because I've been one of those guys for several weeks now. The fixtures themselves obviously aren't amazing. It's a little bit. I think it's a little bit like Southampton's game week they've just had, in that it was one hard game and then one nice game. So Chelsea's defence, as we all know, very good over the last 4. They've got the best XGC of any team in the Premier League over the last 4. It's better than Man City, so it's close. But either way, Chelsea are the best for that. Southampton obviously scored against Chelsea, but outside of Minamino's goal, I wouldn't have said that Southampton caused them too many problems. United generally against the bigger teams don't do. They play a different game. And I kind of talked about it on the Scoutcast as a reason why I might sell Fernandez. But now he has a double, I won't be doing that. But I would still have my concerns over the Chelsea game being anything other than 0-0. Because just going over the games that they played against big teams this year, obviously they lost 6-1 at home to Spurs. And I think that's what sparked the change in Solskjaer. Because then game week 6, Chelsea 0-0. Then game week 7, Arsenal, they lost 1-0, but it was a really dull game, and the only goal was the Aubameyang penalty. Then game week 12, Man City 0-0. Game week 19, Liverpool 0-0. Game week 21, Arsenal 0-0. These big games, Solskjaer has more of a Mourinho in him than perhaps people can give him credit for. He knows how to set United up in a way that doesn't leave them exposed, and the key component in that, in my opinion, people may disagree, is actually Bruno Fernandes and his role within these games. He is a fantastic creative player. He's a fantastic goal threat. We know what he is going forward, but he's actually one of Man United's best players whenever I watch a full game rather than just the highlights, especially against the big teams, of tracking back and rolling his sleeves up, getting his hands dirty and winning the ball back in defensive areas. Some people say that Pogba raises the ceiling of this Man United team. Well, Fernandes raises the floor of this Man United team. And he's a big guy for doing that, which obviously damages his threat. But, of course, if he's going to play Crystal Palace, fantastic. Because in the last 4 matches, their XGC is the second worst in the league. Obviously, they really should have lost to Brighton on Monday night, and they didn't. I would imagine that Man United are probably a little bit better at converting their chances than Brighton. And I'm going to say no offence, but I also feel like you probably agree with me on that, Joe.
Yeah, it's true. I look at the Fernandes fixtures, and I think when a team is playing, or a captainable asset is playing against either Manchester City or Chelsea, it's a sort of, well, I'll probably take 2 points, to be honest, and hope they don't get booked. But it's not one I would target for big returns. But the Palace game, possibly. Definitely. So in terms of big chances conceded, last 4 matches they've conceded 9 big chances, and they've conceded 6 goals, and nearly 6 on the expected goals conceded. So they're sort of on par for the course. What I found interesting though in the Brighton game, which was a surprise result considering I believe Crystal Palace had 2 touches in the box. And scored
both goals,
which was very similar, I believe, to one of the matches last season against Brighton. I think they had 1 shot and it was a goal, Zaha, and I think that was it. But what I found interesting was some of the comments that Gary Cahill was making, the Crystal Palace defender. So bearing in mind that in terms of defending, against Brighton, they still conceded 3 big chances. They did concede once, but their expected goals conceded was also just under 3. So they're still shipping a lot of big chances. So they are still a team for a quality player like Fernandes to target. But this was what I found interesting, as Gary Cahill said, the last couple of results have not gone our way. Yeah, of course. And performance-wise, we've not been at it. We went back to basics today defensively. There was some old school defending out there today, putting bodies on the line and defending as a team, every man doing his job. Now that worries me as someone who is considering captaining someone playing against them, because that implies they've had a complete change, they've had a complete form, they've looked back and they've thought, right, that's it, let's just go massively defensively. We are not going to attack so much. They've still got a couple of goals, but as we said, 2 penalty. They're not going to score 2 goals from 2 touches a match consistently. That's just not going to happen, especially like against a team like Manchester United. So I look at that and I think, I don't know what to make of it. And it puts an element of doubt in my mind. I think Palace, yes, they're there for the taking, for the Fernandez captainers. But at the same time, it worries me they're going to go ultra defensively. And we've seen Palace before. When they're in ultra defensive mode, which Gary Cahill's quote indicates that's the way they're going, I'm thinking, oh no, is that going to be another boring match? His quotes actually make me want to play Mitchell, not captaining, Mitchell, who may well be part of that more defensive plans. Because when I look at Palace, one of the key things about defence I look at is, probably best remove Van Aanholt and put Mitchell in. That's the way they go. And so I think this could be good for Mitchell owners in the double game week, not to captain, but that's Fernandez. But there are other sort of old stagers, reliable, historically reliable captaincy shouts as well. And looking at the fixture difficulty, of course there's City, but there's Liverpool as well. And they've got that Chelsea game, and that's what puts me off Salah. But they have the Sheffield United game, and Liverpool are in a slump of form. But all it takes is a click of the fingers with a team like City, Liverpool, Manchester United, the big Chelsea indeed, and their form can switch because they've got the players to do it. But are we sleepwalking away from Salah as the captain? Meanwhile, all those who are perhaps not as engaged as we are in looking at these underlying stats are thinking, well, it's just captain Salah, he's got a double game week. What do you think?
Yeah, it's possible. I think the big thing for me really with Liverpool is where the fixture is these days, because they seem to be really bad at Anfield, and most teams are worse off away at home at the moment anyway. Away matches seem to be where teams are picking up a lot of their points. But I had a little bit of a look into Liverpool's home form after they lost to Everton, because they really offered very little. And even Jamie Carragher said Liverpool's defensive problems have been well documented this year. Everybody knows how to talk about that. But the offensive ones, he actually said, were a bigger issue. Now, it's not for me to decide. I mean, I'm not here to say which is a bigger problem for Liverpool, because we don't really care. No offence, we're not here to talk about football, we're here to talk about the fantasy.
Yes.
But if he has concerns about the attack, then we should listen. In the last 6 matches at home, Liverpool have scored 2 goals, which is the joint worst in the Premier League. Okay. So when they're at Anfield, it's not a fortress at all. It's not even like a crumbling one. It's just like a field these days, probably because the fans aren't there. But it makes a big difference. At home, they are still getting some big chances. They've had 9 big chances at home in the last 6 at home, which is kind of mid-table. But the accuracy is just awful. Yeah. And but so the reason I mention it is because people might be aware of that, and especially with the Chelsea game. But away from home, they don't have that problem, and they're going up against a Sheffield United team that is without John Egan, Jack O'Connell, and probably Chris Basham. They're all gone. Liverpool fans can complain as much as they like about having lost Virgil van Dijk and Joe Gomez and Fabinho, but they still at least have relatively first-team people coming in.
Yeah.
With Sheffield United, they're replacing this unit that work together as better than some of their parts, replacing them just with championship defenders, to be honest. So I think there is a real opportunity Liverpool can do something at Sheffield United. We've never really seen Sheffield United have to play without the Holy Trinity at the back. Yeah. So with them all potentially gone, I think there's goals in this game for Liverpool. Last 4 matches, Salah has still had plenty of big chances. He's had 5, which is the joint best in the league. His accuracy, as I've kind of just talked about, with those home games, his accuracy isn't. He tends to snatch at his shots a little bit more at Anfield. He's had 4 shots on target. You know, about 15 players have had more shots on target than Salah. But he does well away from home. So combine that with Sheffield United, I'm relatively happy. Liverpool against Chelsea could be a 0-0 possibly. But then that's another 2-3 points which maybe just tops it up. So it's annoying because a lot of these guys have like one great fixture and one not very nice fixture. So that's like United, Liverpool. So Fernandez and Salah for me are sort of in the same boat. It's a toss up between those two.
Well, let's go back to that fixture difficulty again, because Manchester City actually have two good fixtures in West Ham and Wolves at home, and also Man City are really good at the moment. I don't get a sense with Man City like I do with, say, Manchester United or Liverpool, where they've got a tough game. I think, oh, that could be 0-0. It could be they could nick a goal. But with Man City, I just think it's going to be 4 or 5 goals, whoever they play. That's the way they go for it. But as we said, it's that rotation as well. So going back to XGI, Gundogan, 5 big chances. That's joint top for the last 4 matches. And his expected goal involvement is just under 5. So, on par there. He's had an assist, 4 goals. And minutes per goal attempt in the box under 40 minutes, every 37.7 minutes. He'd be a great option. Sterling as well, 3 big chances. Expected goal involvement, expected to be involved in just under 3 goals as well. So on a par, but it's that rotation, isn't it? Is that what's putting you off City? Fixtures are good, form's good.
Yeah, it does sit at the back of my mind and trouble me a bit. The problem is the timing of this game week. If this game week was maybe 2 or 3 game weeks ago, where we had these exact fixtures and form and whatever, and then I would be less worried because Man City weren't having to think about the Champions League and the other competitions, and Pep has a fantastic chance of winning the Champions League this year. And is the Premier League wrapped up? No, obviously, mathematically, but Man City have got to be feeling pretty confident about winning the league. So there may be at some point a shift towards, instead of starting De Bruyne, Gundogan, these big players in every Premier League game and resting them in the Champions League, surely there will come a moment when that shifts. The question is, when's that going to happen? I suspect, but it is only a suspicion, that it won't happen just yet because their first Champions League games against Mönchengladbach, and I think with their reserves, they aren't really reserves. They'd be starting in any other team.
Yeah,
I think they can still comfortably manage that.
Yeah, we're talking Jesus, Torres, Bernardo Silva. These are their reserves.
Possibly Foden as well.
Yeah, amazing.
I would be, when you consider that De Bruyne is just back from injury, and Gundogan technically is too, I would be quite shocked if after those two both started in the Premier League at the weekend, that they also played in the Champions League. Of course, keep an eye, and if you see them start and play 90 minutes, then start to worry. So, as I said, my suspicion is that they probably can play significant minutes in both of those Premier League games, but it is just a suspicion, and it is Pep. So that is always at the back of my mind. We don't really need to go into too much detail or further detail about what they're capable of doing, because we've already kind of shown in some of the stats. For me, it's a case of, if you fancy one of these guys, do just go and make sure you keep an eye on the Champions League game midweek. And if we get rests for Gundogan, then I think he's a good captain shout.
There are other options as well. We've already gone through so many options, but there's so many teams playing twice. But looking at, I'm going to keep these expected goal involvement stats up, the last 4. And there are other options, and Leicester as well. Harvey Barnes and Vardy. Now, Harvey Barnes had 2 big chances, expected goal involvement just under 2. But Vardy's had 5 big chances, and we've seen this with Vardy before. He's a bit of a stats buster, but when he starts getting those big chances, then even more goals follow. So Vardy and Barnes, they play Arsenal and Burnley. Now Burnley, as we've said, Nick Pope is capable of keeping anyone out. But it's still a reasonable fixture. Arsenal as well. These are good. These feel like good Leicester fixtures. Also, looking at Werner at Chelsea, he's had 4 big chances. Everyone's sort of had enough of, in FPL terms, FPL managers have had enough of Werner. We got burnt early on, and we haven't wanted to go back. But very quietly, he's doing really well. He's had 4 big chances there. He's looking focal to their attack. He's got a manager who seems to be playing him exactly where perhaps he should be playing in terms of getting those attacking returns. But it's those fixtures, Manchester United and Liverpool. And as we said, we both sort of thought maybe it's going to be low scoring, we think, those ones. Maybe a 0-0. But yeah, just those other options there. What do you think of those ones? But also, are there any others before we go?
Yeah, Leicester, I seem to have a bit of a blind spot for them. I didn't trust them at the start of the season, and then they've just carried on ticking on. And annoyingly, I sold Barnes to get Sterling for the most recent game week. Double-figure hauls. In both of them. Very annoying. So I think he can definitely do something. 2 other people just worth, I think, discussing because their stats are quite nice. and these aren't people I'm going to captain. They're probably not people I'm going to sign. But if you're going to free hit, or if you're wild carding, or you really just want something off the wall, but also based on something relatively reliable. Last 4 matches, minutes per expected goal involvement, second best in the whole league is Aubameyang, who is now playing as a 9 finally. And Leicester, I think they can get something. I mean, it's a bit of a punt because it's just one game.
Single game week, yeah. So, but yes.
Punt still. The other one who does have 2 games is Umbe Diagne. Probably said that completely wrong. He's the new Luca Digne, effectively, because his name is basically the same +1 letter. He's the 4th best for minutes per expected goal involvement in the whole league in the last 4. His XG non-penalty is 2.76 in the last 4 matches, and that's the highest in the Premier League. And they are playing a Everton defence who we have discussed, not necessarily completely as airtight as we might think. And Brighton have shown on Monday night that it only takes 2 touches in the penalty box to score against them. So
frightening.
So Diagne is the kind of guy that, probably not going to be captained, but I always like to mention in this differential section, like players that you might not have thought of that have got some decent stats that might become useful to you at some point.
He's good cheap.
Double game week.
6 million, I think he is. Yeah. I think he is an option. I think this is the week where you can go a bit different with the captaincy. If you've got the main captaincy contenders in your team, effective ownership wise, you're mitigating against any of those goals. But you can be a little different. That's why we're considering Calvert-Lewin, because of looking at form fixtures. It looks the best bet. But as we said, there's a lot of good options. So good luck, whoever you pick. But yeah, so David, I mean, this has been a long captaincy video and podcast, more than usual, because there's so many options, and I think there are so many players that can do really well. So it's one of those where going against the crowd could be a massive green arrow. But for now, David, thanks so much for joining me, and good luck with your captaincy decision.
Thanks, Joe, and the same to you.